Charlie Ebersol.
Hi, Charlie.
Welcome, man. How are you?
How are you guys?
Good, good.
Good. He Hate Me is on his way. He's stuck in the traffic.
En route.
Yes.
Walking, running.
Oh,
Is
he is
he?
running. Yeah, I had to get out and walk this morning, too.
Yeah.
We're live,
crazy.
by the way. Just to,
Oh, good.
yeah, don't say
Perfect.
anything that you don't,
Yeah,
don't
exactly.
want broadcast everywhere. Welcome to the show, man.
Good job.
Thank you guys.
It was really good.
Did you want? So did they tag you to direct the XFL documentary because of your dad, or is it something you wanted to do?
Both. When we originally put the film together, and ESPN came to me, they were of the mindset that my father and Vince would be more honest if I was the one doing it. I hadn't directed a documentary in like 10 years, so it took me a while to get my head wrapped around it. And then when I went to Vince and my father and was like, "Look, I don't want to make a puff piece. I want to really."
I mean,
get
it's really
into
crazy
it."
that you got Vince at all.
Well, that explains
Vince
how you
does
got
nothing,
Vince
yeah.
and your dad. I was like, how did they get these two? Oh, that's right.
Yeah, it was insane. I mean, Vince was the bigger sell, and I ended up going up to Stanford a couple of times and sitting down with him. And I mean, I grew up with these guys because my dad and Vince created this Saturday Night Main Event together.
Right.
So
I know.
First, 10 years of my life, Hulk Hogan was my babysitter because he was the last one that would go out on the show.
Right.
So I'd go in his dressing room during the show, and he'd look after me, and then I'd go out. So like Vince and my father were like really hugely important figures in my life, which I leaned on heavily and guilting them both into doing the film.
What was Vince's first reaction when you approached him?
He hadn't. You know what's funny is Vince is one of those guys who he's a very successful entrepreneur. So when something's done, he puts it down and doesn't really think about it again. So his first reaction was like, "I don't really remember that much about what happened." And then I
Like
was
he
like,
doesn't remember the X. It was like you started
He blocked
a
it out.
football league,
He
dude.
blocked it out.
Yeah.
"Yeah."
He blocked it out.
Started talking about Raw.
The best is in the interview. I'm telling him. I was asking about the blimp. The XFL blimp that crashed, and his reaction's totally genuine. He's like, I go, "Yeah, you remember the blimp?" He goes, "I don't remember much except that it crashed." And I was like, "That's the only thing you
They
remember."
did. It was like this great promo thing that they did to fly over like one of the NFL
Playoff
stadiums.
game.
Yeah, playoff game.
Yeah.
And the blimp crashed.
Yeah, it crashed into San Francisco
Over
Bay.
an NFL playoff game, yeah.
Yeah. It was an Oakland game, and it crashed into San Francisco
But
Bay.
it ended up being great publicity for better or worse because then everybody talked about the blimp, right?
What did it crash into, a hot dog stand or
a
something?
seafood restaurant.
Seafood restaurant?
Yeah, it got hooked on a sailboat.
So what finally sold Vince? Well, I would imagine for you, your dad must have been not the hardest sell in the world because you're
My
this
dad,
kid.
neither would do it unless the other did.
Gotcha.
Which was hugely important. And the thing is, what sold them ultimately, both of them, was I said, look, I'm interested in talking about the XFL because I think that people think of it as this grand failure, and yet you can't watch a professional sporting event without seeing the remnants of the XFL. But more importantly, I know you two as this great bromance of these two guys who for 30 years were best friends and sort of like this love story, unexpected given their backgrounds. And I wanted to tell that story. I really wanted to tell what it was like for the two of them to become friends, and then because they're so different.
And it also kind of explains, like, the fact that they had that kind of relationship explains how NBC ended up being a 50-50 owner of this kind of crazy idea, because that's not happening unless a guy who's as powerful as your dad is, best friends with Vince.
Well, here's the thing that I don't get into this in the film, but it's sort of a through line of my father's career, is that the business deal underneath that no one really paid attention to is always the biggest part of the deal. So like the Olympic deals in Sydney and China and all these other things that people are like, they spent $1 billion. And I was like, yeah, but General Electric built a ton of power plants in China because of the Olympic deal. NBC, which was owned by GE at the time, would go in. The same with this XFL. Yeah, they own 50% of the league, but they also bought 30% of WWE in stock. So as part of the deal, NBC, who is now WWE's single biggest partner with USA Network and all these other things, had this massive investment, and they were able to get this massive investment right when WWE went public.
Right.
And so when people talk about, they lost $37 million, I'm like, yeah, they did. They made about $300 million down the line in terms of stock. But yeah, they lost a little bit of money on the football deal.
Would season 2 have been
really interesting.
a complete bust? I always felt like, I'm just like, why not just give it
I totally
a second
agree.
year? Because a lot of things fall apart. And if you by season 2, if you had better football, it very well may have caught on. I mean, the first year, yeah, it did tank and it went low, but by the second year, a second year may have happened.
5 of the 8 cities sold out every game. So, like, the live event portion, here's the thing. People think about the Chicago Stadium and the LA Stadium and the New York Stadium, which they count as a sold out because they closed the upper bowl. But you're talking about an average stadium of like 25 to 27,000 people going. That's way above the MLS.
Right.
No,
and you think about controlled cost. The whole business plan of the XFL was not that they were successful in primetime. The whole idea of the XFL was as long as you were successful in day part on Sunday and you were selling out the games, it would work. I just think, the first game was such a disaster that it was very hard to recover the audience after that.
Did your dad, because the fact is they did walk away after season 1.
And by the way, the TV ratings were historically low.
Oh, no. But yes, you're absolutely right. For the Saturday primetime, it went from the highest rated Saturday programming on the first night in 15 years to the lowest ever.
Right.
However, the Sunday programming was the highest Sunday day programming of any cable channel during the period. So the thing is that it's ironic because when my dad and Lauren created Saturday Night Live, they called it the Not Ready for Primetime Players.
Sure.
And my original title for the XFL was the Not Ready for Primetime Players because that's what they were. They just this football was better than Arena League, but nowhere near the NFL. But it was in the lush primetime 8 o'clock spot.
But your father got Vince to kind of only do a season 1 when contractually he was obligated for season 2, and that to me was the friendship because he got Vince McMahon to basically go, yeah, you're right. Season 2 is not probably the smartest financial move, but Vince didn't have to do that.
So there's a story that's also not in the film, but it's my favorite story about my dad and Vince. So my dad and Vince meet. They decide to do Saturday Night Main Event 2 weeks in, the lawyers can't come together on a deal and all this arguing. And Vince calls my dad and says, this is stupid. We should get rid of the lawyers and we should just do this contract. And 11 years later, my dad walks out to the mailbox. He's no longer with the WWE, et cetera, and he gets handed a check. There's a check in his mailbox for a lot of money, and it's from Vince. And he calls Vince and says, what is this? And Vince says, oh, well, we sold the video rights in Indonesia, and that's your cut. And my dad said, but that's not in our contract. And Vince says, we don't have a contract. We have a handshake. And that's how their business relationship was for 30 years. So when the XFL wasn't working, I think my dad's one of the few people in the world who could go to Vince and say, look, this isn't working. And he believed him and trusted him and said, okay, you're right.
The pre-show didn't get a lot of praise. The Opie and Anthony pre-show.
In Orlando. Yeah.
Bob Costas got... No, I mean, somebody mentioned it, but you guys...
Bob talks about it.
Yeah, there was really no mention of Opie and Anthony, but I was kind of hoping they would talk about those guys, because I remember that was when I first started going on their show, and that was the big thing, was the NFL...
They were
XFL
huge.
pre-show.
They were doing... people don't realize that the promotional machine around the XFL... I compare it to like the launch of the first iPhone. It was so... Like the level of interest was disproportionate to anything that had ever...
That's what, to me, it's like one of those... going back to what you said before about like remnants of the XFL, I was kind of getting frustrated watching the move at the end of it. The feeling that I had was this feeling of like, I know, because I'm a big wrestling fan, like that Vince McMahon is one of the great TV content producers
of all time.
And there's like all this genius in the XFL. And it's like, if Vince would just concentrate on the part where he is a genius, it could be something super successful. But he's such a big picture thinker that he has to do everything. And that's where stuff starts to fall apart, I feel like.
Well, weren't they surprised that he got involved like on the ground? They were shocked that he actually showed...
nobody knew. The most famous moment of the XFL is him walking out and going, this is the XFL, right?
The XFL!
No one knew he was going to do that, except that him, my dad, and the director. All the talent, everyone else had been said like, oh yeah, no, Vince is, he's on the outside.
Well, that's also like wrestling, because Vince is used to running his business where you don't tell everybody everything that's going on. The people that need to know, and you make decisions at the last minute, and then you just go and do it.
I fell down the YouTube rat hole of videos about The Rock. I'm a big WWF fan, and I'm a big fan of The Rock. And I fell down this rabbit hole, and I was watching, he did some interview about his first wrestling match ever. And he's talking about how like 30 minutes before the match, he does not know who's supposed to win the match or not.
Right.
And it's the first time he's ever been on television. That's representative of... I remember...
that's why, that's one of the things that makes him, I think, if you could take that, right, and succeed in that environment, then it's almost like when you get outside and go into Hollywood and stuff, that they might feel like they're kind of last minute and fly by the seat of their pants. But something like The Rock is like, this is nothing. The fact that I have 2 days' notice.
I love when people are surprised that WWE guys are good at live comedy.
Right.
Like, wow, John Cena really figured out Saturday Night Live. I'm like, he does Saturday Night Live every night. He does it 3 nights a week on live television.
They're comfortable. They can all improv. Bob Costas made a great point, too. He said the XFL might have worked if they had come at it from a more humble point of view. Like, if Vince had said, look, we're trying this, and we really hope you like it. Like, that might have gotten people on board a little bit. And that's not Vince.
That's the thing about Vince, but it might have humility.
But it still might have worked better, though. But in a business sense, it might have actually worked a little bit better.
Here's the thing. I think that their greatest undoing was also the thing that they felt they needed the most, which was prime time. Because here's the thing is, their business plan wasn't built for prime time. Remember, Vince created the thing 6 weeks before NBC got involved, and it was when NBC got involved that could only justify the financials.
Oh, shit. He hate me is in the building.
This is really
hate me.
This is really why I did the film, so that I could hang out with you. That was really the only thing I cared about.
Is that crazy? Like, we talk about the XFL, and the point of the movie is that it's like one of these. The point of the movie, I guess, in a larger scale, is the impact that it had. But really, the reason why it's a movie is because it was a colossal failure. And
I agree.
That's what's drawing people into it.
Yeah, but here's the thing: nobody ever remembers the single car crash at NASCAR. They remember the 32-car pileup. But by the way, I just want to, because Rod's now here, the one thing that is abundantly clear is there are only 2 players that you really remember from the XFL, which is He Hate Me and Tommy Maddox, who both went on to play in Super Bowls and were both legit ballers.
Right.
And so, like, my thing was, if you'd loaded up the XFL with people like Rod, then you wouldn't be having the conversation that we were having.
Why do you think the XFL is talked about so much in the USFL? People know it existed, but people don't talk about it like they do the XFL.
The XFL changed. Here's the thing: the XFL changed everything about how football was presented. Right? Like, all of a sudden you have the sky cam, you have the steady cam, you have all this. You got
mics on the field.
You got players with personality. I mean, all of that stuff was, and I think that what my father, probably more than any other person, other than maybe David Hill at Fox, the 2 people who understood more than anybody that football was the most television-friendly sport there was. It stops every 15 seconds. There's plenty of time to talk, but there's a lot of action and violence. So if you could give people more access, more understanding, and Vince understood storytelling, you bring those 2 things together and you've got something really meaningful.
Yeah.
And USFL didn't do that. USFL was just a bunch of billionaires who wanted to be in the NFL and couldn't buy their way in. So they created a game that was fun to be in the stadium but was garbage television.
And let's be honest, like, Vince McMahon and P.T. Barnum are the 2 greatest promoters literally of all time. So when you got Vince McMahon promoting something, you're going to talk about it.
And
you
Vince
know what I mean?
And Vince is a real billionaire with real talent, as opposed to the USFL, which was loaded up with people like Donald Trump, who are neither of those things. So, like, you have this dichotomy that when you have 2 great storytellers building something, that's what happens.
What team did you play in the Super Bowl with?
The Panthers.
What was bigger to you, getting to the Super Bowl or the idea of getting to the $1 million game? Your headphones working? There you go.
There we go. I'm live.
Yeah.
Which was bigger?
Yeah, because $1 million game is $1 million. I mean,
they didn't quite sell it out.
Well,
not quite. They were close though.
Honestly, to me, the Super Bowl by far.
Yeah, I would imagine. I'm
going to answer that. More so because I wasn't in the $1 million game. So
right.
I didn't get a piece of that pie. But definitely the Super Bowl.
Are you surprised that, like, you did make it to the Super Bowl and, like, you had this NFL career and the XFL lasted 1 season? And there is still, like, people don't want to call you Rod. People want to call you He Hate Me.
Hey, I'm the creator, so hey.
You like that?
If it allows them to sleep well at night, hey, I love it.
I did love in the movie that you, like, included him explaining what He Hate Me means.
Well, there's a great story.
He hate me, and he hate me.
that fan, Kemish, the guy who does that, is legitimately, he was raised Mormon. He'd never been to any form of professional sporting event before, and the first event he went to was the XFL Outlaws game, and he was like 3 seats away from a cheerleader position where they'd come into the crowd and dance, and so like a cheerleader danced like 6 feet from his Mormon father.
And like the cheerleaders were basically lap dancing. Like the cheerleaders were it was not NFL cheerleaders.
And you guys were encouraged to date them. Did you date any?
No, it was too much other stuff in Vegas for me.
Like what?
Like beautiful women.
Oh, the girls. Okay. So you didn't want to fuck one of the cheerleaders? You figured?
No, that's too close to.
Were the players kind of all going after the same ones?
I'm not sure. Like I said, I was head over heels in Vegas, so it was my first time in Las Vegas. Young, had money, single. Hey, can't beat that.
Did you sleep with a lot of different girls when you were there?
You know what? I can't remember.
Memory's foggy in that period of your life, huh? That's weird. I would imagine if the answer was no, the memory would be a little bit clearer.
Yeah. You know, I remember Vegas, because I've struck out every time I've gone there. I remember
Quite clearly.
One girl I bet in Vegas in 15 years of working there.
That's terrible.
Yeah, it's bad.
It's really a bad average.
It's not your city.
Not my experience.
No, you've done okay in Vegas?
No, I'm just saying this.
Oh, no, it's just a little different. So when He Hate Me becomes like the standout in terms of character, because we all know Vince McMahon is about characters. When He Hate Me becomes the standout character in the XFL, does he take an interest in you? Like, do you have conversations with him? Does he want to brand this character?
Yeah, actually, we had some talks at the time it was going on, and I didn't know it was going to blow up the way it did, but it was a lot of fun, and I got to thank him for allowing me to be me in that league, and it was a fun league, great league, stepping stone, of course, for me to get to the next level. And
did he want to bring you into WWE at any point?
I don't know about that, but he maybe had thoughts.
I bet he did. I mean, it closes after one season, but people still remember He Hate Me. That's a guy who.
Well, they're still selling jerseys.
Exactly.
I bought a jersey online like a couple of days ago.
Did you?
Yeah, for real. The thing that I will say, my favorite Rod story is the day before the game, they said we can't use your nickname, and he was like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "Well, we think it's a gang name or something like that. We can't use it," and so. This is why I love Rod. Rod goes, well, I need to talk to Vince. And they're like, go have your shot. He's over there. And he ran on the field and made his case. And Vince fell in love with him. And was
of course.
Done.
What were you doing before you played for them?
Let me see. Before that, I was actually back at Western Kentucky training. I had just got let go from the Chargers. I was out there with Jim Harbaugh. And I played for his dad in college, Jack Harbaugh, at Western. So... that's that connection. But
at least you were playing though. A lot of guys weren't even playing football.
Right. Yeah, I was playing.
They were working like day jobs.
I was actually fresh out of college. I graduated spring 2000. Went to the Chargers. Got cut around training camp. Went back to school. Was training, and that's when XFL started. They started the draft and whatnot during that fall session, and of course, it started in the spring.
Did you know you were getting cut? Like, how did they tell you you're done?
Wow, you know what? No lie. And it was funny, I always heard that thing with football, hey, well, we can't keep you because it's a numbers thing. The fuck does that mean? A numbers thing? What is that?
We don't want to pay you anymore.
Yeah. So my thing was LaDainian Tomlinson wasn't even there yet. He was a junior, senior, wherever he was at TCU. He was still at TCU. So they had no backs, no outstanding backs anyway. And, the guy I was competing against was a guy by the name of Ronnie Jenkins. We were kind of the same mold, speedsters, smaller speedster guys. And but they had no go-to running back. So when the coach brought me in and told me that, Mike Riley, I think, was the head coach at the time with the Chargers. And he brought me in his office and met with me and told me that. I was kind of like, what the hell does that mean? And he really had no explanation.
He said the numbers?
That's part of the business. Yeah. Oh, it's a numbers thing. We got so many guys here and there. And that. What?
You have no running backs.
What is that?
Were you
going
shocked?
For the no running back offense.
You were shocked then?
Well, I mean, I was young. I was a rookie. I came from a small school. We ran the option. So I put all those things in consideration. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe, I'm not fit for this system or something. But... after that, when I saw my opportunity in XFL and the guys I were competing against, I was like, man, I should have a chance anywhere, because I'm a hard worker and I'm a competitor. If I compete against anyone, if I get beat, we're going to keep competing until I win. That's just my competitive edge.
What goes on in your mind when you find out that there's not going to be a season 2, that there's one season of the XFL and we're done?
Oh, man. It hurt, because that was a fun league. It was a lot of freedom, a lot of fun. money. So, you want to always get paid for something you love doing.
Did you worry about injuries? Because they were saying, I mean, part of the problem with the XFL was in the rules. Like, the rules were crafted a certain way so there was more action, but people got injured all the time.
It's football.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
But on that, like the scramble, they said they were losing people on the opening scramble for possession. Like, that's an unnecessary loss just to see who gets
the one thing I do love about the XFL that still confused. I asked my dad and Vince about it. In fact, I asked my dad about it like a couple nights ago. I was like, I still don't really understand this. The principle is we're going to make it tougher, rougher. Smash mouth is his big word, right? But it's also built for television, so we're going to score a lot of touchdowns. And I'm like, you can't unprotect the quarterback and allow the receivers to get the shit beaten out of them on the field and expect them to score more touchdowns.
Yeah.
Like, it is antithetical in thought, but...
Did anyone get hurt really badly? The no fair catch thing, to me, seems like such a dangerous...
Except no fair catch. Here's the thing about no fair catch. No fair catch was a complete misnomer because what the marketing group thought that meant was no halo. You know, like, we're not going to protect the guys for 5 yards. But the real reason there's no fair catch is because they wanted the punt to be live. So, like, the minute someone, like the pooch kick that Tom Brady does all the time, they wanted them to do that to advance the ball, sort of like rugby. But in the marketing, they were like, oh, it means there's no halo, so the guys are going to get murdered. The thing that was super dangerous that is the part we don't talk about is, there was no helmet to helmet. There were no rules about helmet to helmet. So you look at the hits on the receivers, like we would look at hits, and it was like, especially knowing what we know now about concussions,
Right.
people were just spearing people across the middle because, oh God, what's his name? The former Chicago Bear who was the head of...
Mike Ditka.
No.
William Refrigerator Perry.
I'll go with Ditka. No. Their whole principle was, we want to hit like we hit in the 70s. And then you look at these hits, and these guys are getting lit up helmet to helmet.
Yeah, it was the 70s were... I mean, there's been very few paralysis incidents. I mean, you look at Darryl Stingley and a few other guys, but it hasn't happened that often considering how brutally they hit for so long.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
Do you have any... do you have any concussion problems or no?
I can't remember. I'm pretty sure 1,000,001 of them.
What was it like as a kid when this is all happening? How old are you when the XFL is happening?
I'm a senior in high school.
Okay.
So I was there. I was at the first Vegas game.
Is your dad pissed by the end of it? Like, he's like, what the fuck happened with this thing?
No. Halftime in the first game.
He was...
Yeah, he has. My dad has a horrible poker face. If you're close to him, and he was just like, halftime of the first game, he was like this bad. Because here's the thing: outside of Rod, who was running all over people like it looked like a professional football player was running against a high school team. I mean, he was just cutting them up. Outside of Rod, like everyone else on the field, for the most part, just like it was bad. New York had 19 yards of total offense in the game. I mean, that's insanity.
Right. Yeah, that's not a great number.
No, I mean, it could be better. What was sad, though, is the other game, the Orlando game, was an amazing game. It was 34-37.
Crazy watching that. That's the one that went off the air.
Oh, no, that was
LA
week 2.
Oh,
that was week 2. Oh. I'm saying week 1.
The B game, you mean?
The B game was an incredible game, and, you know.
Yeah.
It was good for Rod because he gets on the field and he looks like
tore everyone up.
It's like a Space Jam out there.
Yeah.
Do you think they made a mistake making the? They had a pretty good announcer. I forget his name. Was it Marty?
Matt.
And then all of a sudden they put him on the B game because they thought he wasn't over the top
Not
enough.
they.
But
Vince.
Vince, yeah. But I think that was probably that probably hurt the legitimacy of it for people who were real football fans and wanted to watch it, to have a guy who really knew football.
Who to put in good old JR and Jerry the King Lawler and Jesse Ventura?
Not the right move.
I loved it.
There's an expression in comedy called putting a hat on a hat. Like if you have a great joke and then you're like, hold on, I got one more funny thing I can add to this, and you lose the audience. The XFL was sort of like that. It was like, we're building a tank, but it has wings, and it has a rocket launcher. Oh, and by the way, did we mention it has a flamethrower? And it makes snow cones. And you're like, why does it make snow cones?
We don't need that.
That was sort of like, by the time you got to the announcers and the governor of Minnesota is the color man, like, you're kind of like, all right, we may have, like, at certain point in time, not just jumped the shark, but also nuked the fridge and about 7 other things.
Right.
Did you see Vince pissed as it was happening, or was he just trying to make it work?
Here's the thing. They weren't pissed about it. I mean, my dad was upset because it wasn't working.
Right.
Vince is used to things not working and just working through it. You know what I mean? Like, he would have gone 4 seasons just because he knows an audience. He can get his audience, and he'll just keep adjusting. He listens to the audience better than anyone.
Plus, he doesn't like to admit that something's failed.
No. I totally disagree with that. I think probably nobody admits failure faster, but he also just drops it faster. Like whenever people talk about Eli Manning and they're like, he's not elite, I'm like, he's elite in my mind because he goes back out on the field after throwing an interception, and you can tell he doesn't remember that he threw the interception. He just moves on. That's Vince.
Next thing. Gotcha.
Vince was pissed during the XFL because the execution was so jacked up.
Right.
And that's where he was like, I have a really good production team. So NBC must have an amazing production team. And the marriage of the two really wasn't like seamless. It wasn't seamless.
What do you think that one thing where the game did go off the air in LA, which they explained why it happened, do you think that was somebody from Vince's team or somebody from NBC's team who fucked that up?
I think it was somebody from an outside party.
Oh, neither one.
Here's the thing, right?
I don't think there's any way it was somebody from Vince's team. No,
I don't think, or NBC. Here's the thing. You're in. It's a little bizarre, right? The NFL wants to bring a team to LA at the time. They end up doing it now, but they wanted to bring a team at the time. In the stadium that the XFL is playing in. And not one, but 2 generators are bone dry with no gas, and the trucks are unplugged from the wall, which is the part we don't get into in the film because I really didn't want to go into like conspiracy theory.
Right.
But like these are really, really professional guys in the media capital of the universe. They're in Los Angeles, and they don't fill up 2 generators, and they unplug from the wall, like so all the trucks go dead at the same time.
Sabotage, maybe, yeah.
Look, I'm not between the blimp crashing and that thing happening and other like weird like things left, right. It just becomes like really don't.
You do get conspiratorial. It's hard not to.
Yeah,
it's hard.
Vince
not
and my father won't go anywhere near that. They will not touch it.
No, they won't.
No. So I was sitting after we screened it at the WWE. I was with Triple H, and he and I were like, somebody was going around, right? He's like, yeah, definitely. Like, all right, cool. As long as that's.
We have to. Travis is saying we have to
wrap up and move on.
I guess you guys have other stuff.
Well, before you go, it said on the internet. Did you date Britney Spears?
Did you really? Oh, awesome.
What is it like for women in your life to come in knowing that was somebody that you dated before? You know what I mean? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I would feel like if I knew that the girl I was dating dated some dude that everybody loved, I would be insecure about that.
I don't know that I can answer that question. I don't know the answer to that question. Here's the thing is I find that the people that I tend to date are people that are enormously successful in their own right. Like Britney's obviously incredibly famous and incredibly talented and all this other stuff. But the type of woman that I find myself dating is always someone who's enormously self-secure and sort of successful in their own right. And so like the girl that I'm dating now who's incredible, she's not a pop singer, so she's not comparing herself to Britney Spears. Right. You know what I mean? Like it's not. They're wildly different in that. I find, and I think this is entirely because of my mother. My mom was this. When my mom and dad got married, my mom was more successful than my dad. And my mom, 10 years in, was like, climbed to the top of the mountain, didn't want to do anything else. She was on the most successful TV show in America at the time, retired and never looked back.
Who's your mom? Sorry.
Susan St. James.
Oh.
And so my view of women was, this is what a woman is supposed to be. It's supposed to be someone who is incredibly secure and incredibly successful and who has their stuff together. And so I've been lucky. I mean, I've been very lucky in terms of that. I think that I was like that was the image of women. That I was
we date very different women. Every woman I
dated Britney?
No, I've never dated women at the top of their field. It's typically women who hate their own guts or in their first 30 days of recovery.
That's why. By the way, that's why I said you and I have different Vegas experiences. Because when I was in Vegas, it was a very different lady.
Well, everybody, you definitely should watch this 30 for 30. It's February.
It's really great.
Yeah, it is great.
Thank you very
Premieres
much.
February 2nd at 9 p.m. on ESPN. It's called This Was the XFL. I'm absolutely fascinated by all things XFL. I believe, it's at my parents' house, but I have every game on VHS. Because there's a big wrestling tape trader.
Where the hell were you like 6 months ago when I was cutting this shit together?
I have all the games on VHS tapes.
We're like looking everywhere.
Were they hard to find?
Well, the WWE has everything, but like there's the commercials that ran during the game aren't there, and the commercials during that period are insane because 90% of the ads were internet companies that like don't exist anymore, and they would do them about the XFL. So like it. Anyway,
I want to go back now and watch my tapes.
Oh, you have them. That's
find
right.
The commercials.
You see all the commercials.
Insane.
That's great.
Insane.
That's great. Well, thanks guys for being here. Make sure you watch the movie February 2nd on ESPN.